Welcome back to the afternoon session. Hope you guys enjoyed your lunch. My name is Haifeng, Huang Haifeng from Zhongstay. I have been with this firm's Hong Kong office for 20 years. Today is my special village to moderate this distinguished panel. I will do a very brief introduction about our panelists and also their topics, and then I will pass to all these panelists to share their thoughts and comments on this very interesting topic. Our first speaker will be Winnie Tam. Winnie is barrister and senior counsel with the Voeux Chamber. She has been a well-respected IP authority in Hong Kong and also a well-demanded international arbitrator as well. She will share some of her thoughts on Gen AI and also the use of Gen AI in dispute resolution, and also how the use of Gen AI can impact the dispute resolution, particularly international arbitration. And then our next speaker will be N.T. Cheung. Dr. Cheung is the head of information technology and also chief medical informatics officer with hospital authority. So all these patients right now in Hong Kong, they have access to those electronic patient records. Dr. Cheung is the one who modernized the hospital authority and all the systems that can make those access available. So he would like to share something about how AI will interact with the medical service. The big topic is, will AI save medicine? We are very eager to hear thoughts from that perspective, particularly from the medical industry. The next speaker will be Sunny Guan. Sunny is the director for legal and compliance from Alibaba Cloud. She has a lot of experience from the industry, advising different clients, and also right now is working for Alibaba. And then a lot of experience on privacy, and also her topic today will be, how AI and deployment or adoption of AI may impact, the privacy issues and how the private issues will be regulated. Last but not least, we have Brian Tang. Brian is here from Hong Kong U. Brian is the founding executive director for LITE Lab at Hong Kong U. The LITE Lab is an interdisciplinary institute, organizing, all this, expertise from law and also from tech side, and to look at all this, frontier, issues, including AI. He will bring a topic I'm mostly very interested in terms of how AI will impact on the future of delivering legal service. So that's something for all these, lawyers, to hear about. So, okay, without further ado, I will pass to Winnie. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I prefer to stand up so that I can see all your faces. I'm very honored indeed, and thank you, Cheung, for extending the invitation to me. Because Cheung and I have worked on IP issues, and I have had contact with Hong Kong U IP students throughout the years through him. I was initially asked to speak on an IP aspect of AI, but I have raised another topic which has been dearer to my heart, and that is how it is impacting on international dispute resolution. And of course, after I have chosen this topic, then we had DeepSeek, which then made the IP angle all the more interesting than before. But I totally agreed with the, as I understand it, I learned over lunch that Justice Locke was on the same page with me. And we both think that IP law, as it now stands, is far outdated and is simply not adept to deal with the modern developments of technology and AI in particular. So the topic, whereas we will continue to make our advocacy and make our voices heard, the issues have no real answers. And it is very much beyond our pay grade, so to speak. So it's a socioeconomic policy in the forming. As regards dispute resolution, I would like to share how my journey started. From the end of 2023, I understood that I was to be a speaker in this dispute resolution conference, which hopefully some of you may have been aware, and that is the ICA conference, International Council for Commercial Arbitration. And there was a very big conference last year in May, held in Hong Kong, and about 2,000 people attended. And I had a little panel right just before the close of the conference talking about AI and arbitration. And my responsibility on that panel of very, very distinguished international arbitration lawyers was to update the audience on what was happening in China and Hong Kong, in this part of the world. And my research then started on with what I could find on the web as what different arbitral institutions and arbitration lawyers and even the judiciary said they were doing with using generative AI for the purpose of assisting dispute resolution. And there were a lot of statements and intentions expressed. But when I went to dig deeper into what was happening, I found that actually not a lot was happening because everybody had realized that there was one major issue with using generative AI in assisting in the dispute resolution process. And that was the opaqueness of reasoning. Right, opaqueness of reasoning. But as regards non-generative AI, the kind of static AI, like helping in procedural management, case management, helping deal with inquiries like a sort of automatic little robot Q&A exercise, that was prevalent, but it was more gimmicky than real. And then so the upshot of all that is that I found one very interesting AI platform, which was actually beginning to do chain of reasoning, demonstrating some reasoning process. And it was a China-based legal research platform, which instead of the Westlaw that we all know, or the LexisNexis that we all know, instead of coming up with lots of cases and references for you to go through yourself, it actually provides a little legal opinion if you ask it a question, and then it tells you why, it gives you a view of the reasoning process, and the best cases, the best moment cases that state that law, and then allows you to click into the case with the link ready, and then to see where the passage is, and then for you to assess whether the statement of law rendered in the form of an opinion was correct, or it has reasoning flaws, et cetera, et cetera. So that was very exciting to me, but the audience was particularly taken aback by the development by one of the arbitration institutions in the southern part of China, where they were doing online arbitrations, but I explained that my personal experience of having been on the tribunal was that as soon as the tribunal was constituted, the template for the award was already generated. So the template has all the principal facts in it. It was a debt case. It was like sort of unpaid bank loans. So the interest calculated, it had all the sums worked out, and it had all the basic facts of the borrowing set out in the award. It has the procedural history, and it has everything except leaving the reasoning section for the arbitral tribunal to fill in. Now, that is something which everybody in arbitration knows, when used in a suitable type of case, will greatly enhance efficiency. Now, of course, it is all subject to checking, right? So as I see it, the conclusion at that stage, which was like middle of last year, I think the consensus at the time was that in certain types of contract, generative AI actually really helps with efficiency. But I think the community also saw that it was not suitable for every type of case. There are much more complex cases. Now, how this type of cases apply is that these are standard term contract cases, like bank loans, like hire purchases, right? And you have this sort of a 2-page agreement that the borrower is to sign. And I mean, it's a standard term contract that the bank or the institution, whatever, dictates on the other party. And then these contract terms are then incorporated to become the basis of the agreement to arbitrate. So in that way, it is all terribly efficient, and human errors are much less likely. I'm very afraid of calculating interest and damages because I'm not very good at reading small numbers or figures. And so I think it is extremely helpful. But so where do we stand now? Now that we can see the power of reasoning built into modern and up-to-date generative AI tools. Now, the need for regulation has been very much the center of the discussion throughout today, as I understand it. So I think it is obvious, and I'm not going to go too deep into it. But for international commercial arbitration, what seems to be much more important is a kind of guidelines that is internationally accepted. Now, for those who are involved in international arbitration, you would know about, say, or several types of guidelines, which we always use, like the guidelines on conflict of interest, like rules on taking of evidence. Now, these are no force of law, but parties to commercial arbitration, they adopt it, and the tribunal may order that these rules will apply, or we will follow these guidelines, and these are internationally accepted guidelines. Now, how are they internationally accepted? They are normally a result, a product of international legal organizations. It could be UNCITRAL, it could be ICC, International Chamber of Commerce, the Arbitration Division, or the International Bar Association, which has close to 7,000 members around the world, 17,000 members around the world. And they have working groups in specialist art areas, including arbitration, and international experts will put their heads together on what sort of guidelines that are commonly accepted, and there will be very rigorous drafting and debating, interrogation, etc., to arrive at a certain set of guidelines. And the IBA has recently set up a working group, and I'm very honored to have been invited as a member. So very soon we will all be working on a set of guidelines for the use of generative AI, which hopefully is internationally acceptable and will be adopted by parties involved in international arbitration around the world as they wish. All right, it's free for them to adopt. But the judiciaries around the world have gone ahead of us. But there is a very important difference between cases which are adjudicated in courts and cases which are adjudicated privately between commercial parties, of course. Now, for judiciaries, they would worry more about court users using AI, generative AI, and then misleading the court. Now, the English judiciary, England and Wales, have published a set of guidelines in 2023. The emphasis was on a duty on the part of the judges to know what they're doing if they're using or reading things that are used that are generated with AI. And I think that is a very important principle And that is, you've got to be able to understand how the technology works and its limitations, etc. And it actually provides tools for judges or some knowledge for judges to detect it when something appears to have been generated in AI. The Hong Kong judiciary has recently published a set of guidelines, and so has the Singapore courts. And the Singapore courts set of guidelines is actually only for court users and not really targeted at judges. But the guidelines published by our courts were very much addressed to judges and also the parties. So the judges are encouraged to learn about the tools, to learn how to use them and be familiarized with its limitations and how it is used to understand more about it. And then there are various guidelines on guarding against bias, guarding against incorrect information, and basically every party takes responsibility for its use. Now, in China, in the course of my research for the conference last year, I was also reading a lot into what the judiciary says they were doing in China. Now, basically, one baseline of the use of generative AI is that it must not detract from absolute judicial independence, impartiality, and the non-delegation of the judicial function is always emphasized. And that is an important principle to observe in international arbitration as well. So the earliest arbitral institution that has come up with guidelines for the purpose of international arbitration is not surprising. It's Silicon Valley Arbitration and Mediation Commission, right? Now, before they came up with this set of guidelines, no one has heard of it. Well, I certainly haven't. It is not a very famous kind of arbitration commission, but because it is Silicon Valley, so it is right for it to have taken the first step. So it highlighted several guiding principles, and there are several I would like to highlight. So the safeguards highlighted by these arbitral institutions guidelines would be to emphasize non-delegation of the adjudicative function of the arbitral tribunal, maintaining impartiality, independence, competence, and diligence. And then it did warn about bias. And then it also warns about the quality of the prompts. And for these particular aspects, we will always bear in mind when we use these more advanced AI tools. Now, for the black box reasoning aspect, we know that DeepSeek has set a very good example of showing the steps of reasoning, all right? But my experience of using mainland Chinese legal research tools is that they have found it, in mainland China, it has been much easier for them to have relatively good data for the purpose of legal research, because all the laws and a majority of the decisions have been digitized and have been fed into, as data, is publicly accessible data. So for Chinese legal research, Chinese law, it's very convenient. But for common law, it is much more complex, and it is much more difficult for the user, or actually for the engine, to deduce legal reasoning from diverse decisions, particularly from different jurisdictions. So as a research tool for law outside China, we should always be extremely careful. Now, there's also a very important difference between the approach of judiciaries of the civil jurisdictions and common law jurisdictions. Now, in civil law jurisdictions, the judge is expected to have an inquisitorial role. So they themselves use legal research tools to find out about the answers to the problems that they have to try, I mean, to the legal issues that they have to decide on. And they also have to have some reference to the facts, although they have no systems of stare decisis. But mainland courts, for example, have been increasingly aware of the importance of a more uniform and fair system where if you lose a leg in a car accident in Shandong, it would not be seen as a much less valuable loss than if you had lost a leg in the same sort of accident in Guangdong, if you know what I mean. So a kind of an attempt to achieve 类案同判, there's similar cases, same adjudication result, is what drives the use of AI and even generative AI in the judiciary. And I can see that looking forward in the international arbitration arena, because of the huge disparity in caseload, in the number of cases that the mainland judiciary and mainland arbitral institutions have to deal with, there will be an increasing use of generative AI as a reference, even in decision-making. Now, in this regard, they are much more liberal than than jurisdictions elsewhere, where we would regard it with great reservation to actually use generative AI to assist in decision-making. But in public statements from authorities, they seem to be encouraging the use of generative AI in, say, coming up with a suggestion of how cases should be adjudicated. But for international arbitration, in the rest of the world, and also cross-border international arbitration, I do not see that happening anytime soon. The guidelines, which are going to be published by arbitral institutions and international working groups, will likely ask for disclosures to be made on the use of AI. Now, as an arbitrator, what I shall be doing is I would always leave counsel, which in an adversarial situation, to do AI-generated work if they see fit. So in other words, I am unlikely to be generating chronologies for myself or generating diagrams of the parties' relationships. And these can all be done by the parties as they please in the course of servicing their clients. And then the tribunal can use these as tools to assist them and taking it as a case of one party, or if it can be agreed for both parties. And these will be very useful tools. Now, the most important thing, as I said, would be for us to continue to observe our duty of non-delegation of judicial function or adjudicative function, and then to make inputs to AI tools generalized and anonymized with permission where necessary. I know that there are IP issues, but if counsel submissions, they often go to 100 pages or 200 pages sometimes. And if I do have their permission to use the submission and generate such a summary or whatever that I find useful and helpful for the purpose of efficiency, I do not see the party saying no to it, but I should at least ask as a member of the tribunal. Disclosure of use of AI is not something that is seen in recommended guidelines or drafts of guidelines at the moment. So this is something to be discussed in working groups around the world. And it has been recommended by in the judiciary guidelines for Hong Kong judiciary that there should be use of security features such as disabling the chat history and function and the cross-platform access function. And I think ultimately this will be a great commercial opportunity for closed AI tools. So a lot of companies, actually next week I'll be seeing 2 companies who are trying to market tailor-made closed AI tools for members of the legal profession or groups of practitioners, so that the fear of loss of confidentiality can be mitigated. So I wait to see what they have to offer. But things are moving so fast. What I was offered last year, I would expect to be different from what I will be likely to be offered this year. So in conclusion, I do see generative AI tools as an ally, but we have to use them with great caution. I do not see generative AI tool as a predator coming from my role as an arbitration practitioner. I can see that they will take away jobs which had taken trainee solicitors many hours, or junior arbitration lawyers many hours. And many of them have left their jobs because they couldn't stand the late nights anymore. And I can see a lot of that easing out, and some of them will lose their jobs. But as I see it, the parties who seek justice, even in commercial arbitration, they want to see empathy. They want to see integrity and justice and fairness that can be seen in human interaction. So I do see that dispute resolution will still go on, but for the minor cases, like the, say, digital commerce platforms, they are already sometimes resolved digitally, and no doubt, and my colleagues on the panel may tell us more about it. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Our audience will have questions, but we will have a separate, session for questions and answers at the end of this panel. So next will be Dr. Cheung.
Sitting down, I think. Yeah, so I gave a somewhat provocative title, Will AI Save Medicine? And I do have to apologize for that. I mean, I was told to come to the law school to do an AI panel. I thought maybe to get people interested, I have to give a really, provocative title. It turns out I didn't do that. Got this full house here. When I was coming up in the lift, I saw that all of the posters for all the seminars, they're all about AI and digital stuff anyway. So everybody's on board. I see the legal profession is on board. So that's great. So I'm not going to be able to answer that question, will AI save medicine? But I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing with AI in the hospital authority, because that's where I work. Just to give you a little bit of background, the hospital authority is the largest healthcare provider in Hong Kong. We run all of the public hospitals, a lot of the public clinics. And you see, we're a very large organization, and it's very efficiently run. It's been voted the most efficient healthcare system in the world more than once. And you know that good stuff. But it does mean that we're under, because it's a low resource setup for very high volumes, under an awful lot of stress. And we're always looking for how can we improve the situation. Now, healthcare in Hong Kong is not unique in that healthcare everywhere in the world is under amazing stress as the population gets older and all this sort of stuff. But because in the hospital authority, all of the digital stuff is done by one body. That's my team under the hospital authority. We do have a bit of something to say about this. So, wrong way, sorry. Here we go. So when this, many of you know that AI has been through, it's not a new thing. AI was invented in the, possibly in the 50s. We first saw examples of this, but it wasn't very good, right? And it's only in this last few years that we've seen some AI that could actually make a difference, right? And a lot of that's due to, you know, the ways technologies improved and the amount of data that's available, processing power, all that sort of thing. And as well, then, you know, a few years back, we started seeing that actually we need to really get on top of it this time because we think this is going to be real, right? This is going to really impact care. And so we decided back in 2019, now this is a panel on regulation and AI policies and that sort of thing. And I hope I'm not speaking too broadly, you know, saying there aren't really many that can apply to us in medicine in Hong Kong today. So we thought we had to, you know, do something ourselves to say, how can we do this safely? Because we know that the AI is still, you know, it's a developing technology and it has lots of things that we may not know about. How do we do it safely? Okay, so these are the principles that we established back in 2019, and we ratified it through, you know, a governance process. So first of all, it's non-decision making from then to now, and in the, you know, short term, in the future, the AI will not be making decisions for the humans. The human, especially the doctor, is always going to be the decision maker, all right, for any actual care decisions. You know, hopefully together with the patient. The second one is that because AIs are built on data, and a lot of times these models are built elsewhere in other populations with different racial backgrounds, different disease patterns, whatever, that model may not apply to our population. So we have to validate all AI models against local data. Fortunately, we have a lot of local data, so we're able to do a lot of that. But we have to do that. You bring an AI in, train somewhere else, it'll make the wrong decisions. It'll make the wrong inferences based on our population. You need to involve our humans. And when I say users, I'm talking mainly about the clinical users. We need to involve them in the you know, the startup process, in the development process, in the implementation process. And as it's being used, we have to constantly get feedback to see whether it's doing what we thought it would. Are there any issues that we haven't seen? How do we fix those? Okay, so continuous involvement. The workflow issue, I mean, it goes back to my first point about the tremendous pressure that the frontline staff are under. If we introduce an AI agent as a separate thing, this used to be one of the problems with the older generation of AIs, where they could show that an AI would make a really good model, a really good decision, like it could provide advice equivalent to a consultant doctor. You had to sort of separately go to a terminal, ask it all these questions, and eventually half an hour later, it would tell you the right answer. Well, a doctor could have come up with that answer in 30 seconds possibly. So it didn't work because it wasn't helping the actual process of healthcare. So you have to look at how does the AI integrate into the workflow. And for me, that's actually one of the hardest things about rolling out AI into a clinical situation is even after you've shown it works and everything, how do I make it actually helpful? So that's the workflow issue. And lastly, we really wanted everybody to get involved. And not just the people we were working with directly in my department because we have limited bandwidth, but we wanted everybody to start thinking about how can AI help? Where are the places that they think it can help? And at least start thinking about it because this is not just an AI problem, this is an innovation problem. How do we bring new tech to bear upon all aspects of care? If we only have a bottleneck through one department, it's too narrow. We want everybody to think about it. Okay, so that's sort of what we started from. And this was, like I said, established in 2019. Then we had a very interesting 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. But we were still going full speed with all this stuff during that period. And so we had actually done a lot of development in AI and put into actual use in the hospital authority. One thing about the hospital authority is because we have 43 hospitals, 160 clinics or something, tons of patients. Whenever we do something, we want it to happen at scale. We want it to be applicable across the board. So you have to do it in a way where it's not just focused on one single department. It has to work for everybody. Much harder to do, much harder to do that. But once you succeed, you make an impact because you're affecting the lives of millions of patients and thousands of doctors and nurses. Okay, so I just want to show you some of the things that we've actually done. Not all of these are fully functional, but most of them are. So a lot of the work has been in imaging. Now, this is not generative AI. A lot of what we've done, these few slides are non-generative. And the reason, of course, the generative AI is a newer thing, right? It didn't exist in a usable way until the last 2 years. But the older type of AI, the machine learning, a lot of it was image-based. So then naturally, that's where we go with radiology images and other images. And so, for instance, today, every single chest X-ray done in the hospital authority, and that's millions every year, every single one is looked by an AI, right? And the AI then runs its models through, and it's more than one model actually, and it'll say, oh, did I see something to be concerned about? Say a nodule, maybe a cancer, or a nasogastric tube misplaced. And a lot of these things, I mean, you can build thousands of models. You've got the data, you can build models, right? But to build a useful model, you have to have a use case, a business case. And so a lot of times, because HA is so big, there's so many problems, not that hard to find actually. So the one is that somebody made a mistake, a patient got harmed, can an AI help there, right? And so we've managed to build some of these on those use cases. And that's always it's not a good starting point. Someone got hurt. It's a good starting point to know that this will actually be useful. So all chest films are looked at for certain things. And then if the AI sees something, then we get to that workflow issue. How does a doctor get notified? How do we make sure that, the appropriate action has been taken? That's part of what we do. The hip fracture one was an interesting one because we built that with Hong Kong U actually. So it was started off as a study project with some Hong Kong U researchers to look, could an AI interpret hip fractures? And in fact, it was a very good model. And it's able to look at, again, every single hip fracture, every single hip X-ray in HA is looked at by an AI, and the AI can spot things that the doctors just don't see, right? Very subtle fractures. Sometimes these are quite notoriously difficult to find, and it'll flag it up. So we have that same issue, then how do we get it to the right person? But in this case, the hip fracture, for instance, we've definitely already shown there's been, several cases in the year or so that's been rolled out that the doctors would have missed it, and the AI told the doctor, hey, maybe you should take a second look. And indeed, they, oh, dear me, that was a fracture. Didn't see it. Now we're going to take care of it. Okay. So that's we've shown that it actually helps. The last one is an eye examination called an OCT. This one's a slightly different one. It's just it's a very tedious sort of comparison doctors have to do, looking at images over time, and sort of like Winnie's example, where it's sort of a tedious thing that the AI can do very easily and do very well. So we're developing that one. Now the middle one is comes from another incident where a patient had the liver failure was caused by a drug which was used without taking into consideration something to do with the patient's hepatitis status. Too complex to get into here, but the point is then we're able to automate. The AI itself is actually a very simple AI. Barely call it an AI, but it's the workflow here is really important, where we have a series of different models which flag up, these are the patients who may have hepatitis, these are the patients who are getting these certain types of drugs, these are the patients where they're getting the drugs and with the hepatitis and not being properly covered by a third drug. Okay, so it's a complex thing, and the AI flags these up, makes sure that someone realizes this case could be a problem, and then the doctor should do something about it, because it's been brought to their attention. So that one has been run for several years. And again, it's identified cases where something bad might have happened if the AI hadn't flagged up. All right, the last set here is we're trying to bring the AI to the patient now. So these, you could say in a sense they're not as clinical, but they're things where they're helping the patient in their own sort of healthcare management. So the first one's really simple. If you're measuring blood pressure, your own blood pressure, and we now, you can enter it into HA Go, right? Of course, you can always, if you have a Bluetooth thing, you can just go straight in. That's great. But a lot of people just have the blood pressure cuff with the numbers, and instead of, having to type it in, or you can just show your phone. Your phone looks at it and says, "Okay, that's your blood pressure," right? And it reads that. So it's a very simple thing, but it's nice. And people like that sort of thing, right? So it's a very simple one, but it's nice, and it's AI, not generative AI, but it's AI. And the similar thing with lots of different things people need to enter nowadays, your blood glucose measurement, all these things can be done. The last one there is joint measurement, which is I like this one because I've just had shoulder surgery, where when you do rehab after any sort of joint thing, you got to start moving your arm around, and you have to see how high you can move it. And if you're at home, you have no idea how far your arm's moved, right? But the AI, now you hold the phone there and you do your exercise in front of the AI, and the AI says, "Oh, you only got to 70 degrees, you need to get to 80 degrees. And then the therapist, when they next see them, they can see your results and say, "Oh, yeah, you need to work harder on this or that, right? So it's a sort of thing where extending that treatment and the management beyond when you're seeing the therapist and able to do it better at home. So that's sort of this patient experience thing we find that AI can help a lot with. All right. Let's see. Oops, I'm sorry. Here we go. Okay, so here's some other AI applications we put in place. So that's the one on the left there, I call it patient flow management. So in the last 2 or 3 years in HA, we've actually, all the major hospitals have now established what we call a hospital command center. And it's something that, this is, I mean, all over the world, this is a very recent thing, where you establish a place where all the data flows into a central, it's like, you've probably all seen Mission Control from NASA, where all these guys are sitting in a room with screens and all that. So it's a smaller version of that. And the idea here is that we have all these people looking at the patients and all the beds and making sure that the beds are being turned over properly. Patients aren't waiting too long for this and that. Patients who are being held up get treated faster and seen faster so we can move everything along. So it's still operations thing. But as part of that, there's AI in things like predicting. We think, oh, this hospital is going to discharge this many patients. We need this many beds. Sorry, admit this many patients. We need this many beds. There's going to be a blockage in the coming hours due to this or that. So it's that sort of thing. These sorts of models are operating and just giving the people running the hospital a bit of a sense of where they need to focus. Apart from the real-time data, they have some future ideas as well and some predictive power there due to the AI. And again, these things very much dependent on that particular hospital. So the AIs have to be tuned or trained on that hospital's data. Right? You can't take a foreign model and apply it to a Hong Kong hospital. Makes no sense at all. All right. The last one here is one that we're just getting into. We've just trained the first couple of models to do this, and we're just starting to do trials on this one. And that is that patients are sick, obviously. If they're in hospital, they're sick. And some of them will get really sick, right? And when I say really sick, we're talking typically about this patient will have to go to ICU, right? And that's a bad thing. You don't want patients to have to go to ICU because it means they're sick, right? And so what this AI is doing is taking that patient's minute by minute data and predicting which patients will deteriorate in the next 24 hours, 48 hours. Okay, so this is something that humans have been doing, that the clinicians and nurses have been doing using all sorts of different manual methods, and they're not very good at it, right? They're not very good at it. The AIs are far better. So this is what we're doing now, is like just running these models in the background and flagging up bed number 3, this patient, Mr. Chan. Look at him, please. He's going to go to ICU soon. Now, this sort of thing it's a big topic in medicine elsewhere as well. So it's just something we're doing along with the rest of the world here. But like, again, it has to be trained on local data. Our patients are different, our factors are different, so we have to do it ourselves. But that one's something that we're just starting to put into trial, and next year hopefully we'll have a much better sense of how well it's working. So you can see some of these are very clinical, some of them sort of verging on administrative. But that's not. We're also doing now. So that type of AI based on just big data, neural network training, that sort of thing is what I call now old style AI, and it can do certain things, but it's very narrow. It's a very narrow type of AI. And the good thing about it is that it's quite easy for us to understand. We know the failure rate. We can draw a curve of how well it succeeds. We understand when it fails, how it fails, and we can account for it, right? So it's almost like a lab test, actually. Lab tests are not perfect, right? Nothing in medicine is perfect, actually. I shouldn't say it probably, but it's true, right? Nothing in medicine is perfect. We understand how they fail, right? So with the older style of AI, I can say that we also understand more or less how it fails, right? And we know where it's going to fail. Now, the generative AI, the issue with generative AI, that's much harder to do. I think the reasoning models are better. Then someone has to read a lot of stuff, right? But if you're trying to apply a reasoning model as a back-end thing, nobody's got time to read that reason. So then you have to say, well, how much can you trust it? Where will it fail? And basically, we have no idea. It's very hard to say. So that's why we've been a little bit slower, apart from it being newer, rather more careful about how to use it. So I think one of the things you'll see here is that a lot of the use cases we're doing for generative AI are even more removed from the actual clinical process. So there's much less danger of something bad happening to the patient because of a weird AI decision, right? So, for instance, here's one. When we do an HA Go, we have a chatbot the patients can talk to. Generative AI, it's really bad, right? Because, chatbots before AI were really bad. Now, we're now going to be putting a generative AI one, but then you have to train it very specifically in a way that it can't go off and say crazy things, right? And that's like, depends on how you prompt it, how you build it, how you structure the way it's presented, all that sort of thing. And that's the sort of thing we've been working through. So now I think we're about to release a generative AI chatbot that is very focused, very targeted, but it's good with language, so it'll be much friendlier. Or actually, Winnie mentioned one thing we're having this discussion about. People want empathy from yeah, but the fact is, and then there's been studies on this, is that AIs are much better empathy than actual human doctors, because doctors and nurses are too busy, and AI has all the time in the world, so they can be very emphatic. I mean, they can show a lot of empathy, even though it's fake. They can show it, right? So that's a very interesting point. Actually, I'm very pro fake empathy from AIs. So the second one here is a lot of administrative things. Now, an organization like HA has a ton of policies, guidelines, rules, a lot of clinical things like that. And in the old days, for us to put those into an AI, we would have to sort of like really translate them into computer stuff, right? Extremely difficult, because a lot of these are written just in language. But it turns out LLMs are really good at that, right? So this is where we're now taking these things are, again, not decision-making. All they're doing is helping the people who need to apply these policies, help the doctors and nurses and the admin people interpret these policies. You ask a question, and it'll tell you, oh, according to this policy, this is how it's done, right? So that's the sort of thing we're doing a lot. Instead of people spending hours searching for stuff, we just ask the AI, right? So we're doing that. Okay, here's some more. Report translation. This one's one that we didn't used to have a problem with because everything was done more or less in Hong Kong. And in Hong Kong, most of these things are done in English. But now we're looking a lot more cross-border. And in China, everything's written in simplified Chinese, right? Chinese is bad enough, simplified Chinese, right? So now we're looking at auto translation. Now, we all know that the AI translation is very good now. But again, there's still a niggling fear. What happens if it translates one word wrong? Because in medicine, one word can be it, right? Could be life and death. So we're still a little bit thinking about how we do this. So at the moment, it's really, we're giving that translation. It's just a reference for the doctor to look at, read it, interpret it with your own clinical sense, please. It's not definitive, right? So that's the sort of thing we have to do now. But I mean, we can't just stop until it's perfect because we can never demonstrate that it's perfect. Okay. Secondly, is a summary AI. So this is again, LLMs are great at this. We're feeding the patients the entire discharge. The entire record of this patient. Please tell us give me a summary, and it'll do that very nicely. Again, don't trust it. You have to review it yourself. Okay. Lastly is one that's a little bit more active. We're getting a lot of referrals every year, millions of referrals coming in. A human now reads each one of those to decide how urgent that patient is. We're going to ask AI to do that with all this, again, crafting the prompts so that it doesn't do, give a cancer case a 1-year appointment, that sort of thing. Make sure it doesn't happen. So we're about to start putting that one into practice with very bounded sort of prompts. All right. So, in medicine, this is a regulation form. As far as I know, there are no regulations in Hong Kong on AI. Does that mean we're just doing this like crazily? No, because one benefit of doing this in medicine is medicine's already, yes, last slide. One of the benefits of this of doing this stuff in medicine is that AI is already bounded by medicine is bounded by ethical regulatory principles in general, right? So if we look at the first one, medical ethics. I was taught when I was studying medicine many years ago, and I still remember this: the 4 pillars of medical ethics: beneficence, non-maleficence, autonomy, and justice. Right? We could have a whole day seminar on this, but these are fundamental things that everything in medicine you adhere to, including our use of AI, right? So there's no exceptions there. Secondly, it has to be very scientific. Medicine is a scientific enterprise. We know how to, develop new drugs, develop new tests. We know how to assess them. Similarly, we're doing the same thing with AI. Now, it's like I said, it's much easier with the old style of AI, harder with generative, but we have to do this sort of thing for something to be used in medicine. It must follow scientific principles. And you see some of the things I've written there. Lastly, we're not doing it as an IT shop, like, big tech just booming and throwing it out there. We're doing it in close collaboration with our users, in some cases with patients, and with all the various management people. So it's under, it's under control. But, we know that new things are coming up, and hopefully we can keep things under control while we make the best use of these tools in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Very interesting topic. Next will be our Sunny.
Okay, thanks. It's a very difficult decision for me whether I should stand here to present or I should sit there, because both Winnie and Dr. Cheung are very famous and I respect experts in the industry. So I decided to stand here to give my presentation to show my respect. But if I ask this question to DeepSeek, can it answer me? I doubt the answer is no, because the DeepSeek may not know how serious we are today and how many famous experts we have today, right? So it brings us a question: what a generative AI is based to make it layman, just computing resources and data. I think both Winnie and Dr. John mentioned it previously in their talk. So let me give you a real life scenario here before I talk about the privacy issue. So imagine the generative AI, the bot, is trained based on the data, especially that areas of expertise that you use in company. So if my company just launch a bot for HR function to support HR function, it should be used for the staff to get quick answer on the frequently asked questions and to support HR staff to improve their efficiencies. But there is one spy in my company. They just won't get my salary. They ask the bot, so what is Sunny's salary? The bot may be, intelligent enough to say, hey, it's a personal data, I cannot tell you. But what if the spy tuned the prompt saying, I need to hire a director under legal and compliance function in a technology firm with a focus on the privacy and security function. Okay, the bot may answer, okay, I prepare an offer letter for you with a standard template of the technology company, and you should offer the salary range, blah, blah, and what I refer to is Sunny's offer or Sunny's information in the HR system. Okay, the spy gets whatever that he wants. So it highly depends what the data you use to train the bot and how you moderate the content, especially for the content moderation from the question and the answer. And the second scenario in our real life is when you scroll down your IG or Facebook or those social media apps, you may saw an advertisement about just a pair of shoes you were just talking about with your friends. So is it a coincidence or someone is listening to you? So based on this, we should consider in the age of AI, who is watching you? How should we protect our data and what does it mean to your privacy? So we talk a lot about the efficiencies, including the healthcare data to improve your health information, especially for those wearable devices like smartwatch, to collect your data and also remind you to stand up when you sit there for a long time for the work. So it's good, right? But how do they know what you are doing? It's based on some basic information and you input previously in your smart device. And also it knows that your gesture, your activities during a day. So it has already based a basic understanding of yourself. And also for the, for example, the smart home device, it can help you to turn on the curtain in the morning to play a music you like, So how do they know? How do we know what is the time zone you are? Because you have already input your home address in that device, for example, and they may know your time zone, they know when you wake up, and they know your hobbies, interest in the music. So they can help you to feel convenience in your life. But the basic background information is they have already obtained your personal information, especially those information you may not want to disclose. So all the efficiencies and convenience is based on the large technology and data running on the back end. So as a consumer user, individual user, what should we do to protect our data? The first thing is based on the privacy law. It has already given you the right to reserve your rights of the data to be disclosed and what the data to be used. So when you, no matter use the apps or use the web browser, so be careful about the privacy policy on the data collected and to be used, especially on those cross-border data transfer scenario. If you don't want your data to leave for certain area, for certain other purpose, especially in the area which the law environment is not comparable to the country you are in. And also for other scenario, you may be mindful about your own face, your own activities to be published on those social media, especially for those set as a public available. Because we know that the deep fake is very advanced today. I can also let you see the Trump to say a person of my speech today. Actually, it's very easy from the technology perspective. But is it real? So imagine this, if your face has already been got by some malicious purpose, they can use your features, your face to intrude your device and store your money. And it's especially nowadays, we all use virtual bank, the e-banking devices. So it is actually very easy to intrusion those KYC and mobile recognition verification process with some facial image created by AI. So be careful about the data you published by yourself. So after we understand from the consumer perspective, as a company user, we also need to be careful about the data we use to train those generative AI and also the AI technology we use to facilitate some critical decision. So one is to use the security mechanism, especially for the privacy preserving technology to anonymize your data, and also to put a strong authentication mechanism, especially with advanced technology to especially it's a bit technical, but we call it zero trust, not only based on the static matters, but based on the dynamic matters to verify the people who access the data from the time, from the identity, from the device, from the IP. So there are lots of advanced technology that a company can adopt in order to facilitate you in adoption of the AI. And last one is about the technology vendor. So as a technology vendor, Alibaba Group is also one of the technology vendor. The security and privacy is always our top priorities. So when we launch a service offering, it's not actually an easy job. We need to go through a very complicated process to embed the privacy by design in every stage of the offering launch, from the design to the development, to the implementation, until the offline, including the data deletion. So we put every security mechanisms in the necessary steps in order to prevent the data leakage and data misuse. So to summarize my speech, I think the future of privacy is actually not predetermined. It's actually up to us. Everyone can shape the future of privacy to decide that to use a technology to serve people instead of the other way around. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for inviting me to speak here, and I'll do the flip side of Sunny. Since Sunny stood up, I'll sit down, so we're equal in terms of the respect we have for both our elders here, right? So the presentation I'm giving today, so at Hong Kong U, LITE Lab stands for Law, Innovation, Technology, Entrepreneurship. We work on the law of technology, which is a lot of what today's topic of, but today I decided to speak also about the other aspect we work on, which is the technology of law. How do we use technology to improve the legal service, this delivery of legal services and access to justice? So I'll start with a couple of, a quick canter through. So this issue of technology and innovation is not a new one. You know, in 2018, the Scarlet, which is the Standing Committee of LegCo, already had indicated that you know, technology has important implications for the access to justice, business of doing law, skills required for new lawyers, perhaps the demand for new lawyers, and requires new knowledge and skills and potentially a different mindset. I think the mindset question is a very important one. This was issued in 2018, right before this Gen AI stuff. Fast forward last year, the Law Society issued some guidance in relation to the use of Gen AI, and they're very supportive. Oops. Oh, sorry, I need to change my slides. My apologies. My bad. Here we go. There we go. So that's the Scarlet report extract, and this is the Law Society guidelines in relation to the impact of AI. I highlight the arrows to show to my dean to say, look, they say what law school should be doing for training the next generation, right? So here is a couple of famous slides. This is the famous Goldman Sachs slide, which said 44% of tasks of legal tasks will be replaced. Right, so this is legal tasks, and mind you, this is applicable not just to lawyers, but all knowledge workers, as you've heard earlier on from Dr. Cheung. This is from the same report, but less well known. Hong Kong ranks the highest in terms of the impact, according to their study. And since then, you have seen some of their various reports about how Gen AI will impact the business of law, the billable hour, this legal wallet. So these are all elements that, and then also in law schools, how do law schools address all of these things? So at LITE Lab, we're lucky enough to have started working with law, with legal tech and no-code, low-code platforms. So we've garnered a few awards. I do research on the on AI governance, what I call humans working in the loop. I call it the Chiron framework. So Chiron, whom Homer, the poet, not Simpson, called the justice and wisest of centaurs. But then Gen AI came about. So are we talking about a cheeky jinn, a genie, where you have to wish, the right kind of prompts? Or is it a stochastic guru where because of the black box, it's unfathomable kind of pronouncements of insights and you don't really understand what's coming about? So how do we think about some of those aspects? So I run roundtables both with in-house counsel across Hong Kong, as well as law firms in relation to understanding how they're dealing with and adjusting to the impact of these technologies. And we're lucky enough for some of our pedagogies led to my invitation to speak internationally about how we're teaching legal tech at Hong Kong U, and also starting to do training of lawyers in legal tech and the like as well. So here are some ways for you all to think about the adoption of legal tech, AI in legal. So one approach is wait and see. Let's not adapt it just yet, right? And the benefit is the status quo. So you know how things run and you can just keep going. But concerns are, well, are we going to lose out on competition? You know, what do our clients now expect? What do the adjudicators for those? So I'm a transactional lawyer by training. I was in private practice in Australia and New York, and then I came in-house here to Credit Suisse. So that's my background. But increasingly, as I speak to my friends in the dispute resolution space, what do the adjudicators now expect, right? In terms of the cases being presented to them. The second approach potentially is, you know, let's adopt it. Let's try the different tools. Some law firms have even created what they call, you know, wrapper GPTs. So you can actually, so the law firm uses an underlying LLM, but they say, I'm Linklaters, I've created Layla. I want it to write like a Linklaters lawyer. So how do I train on my Linklaters data? So So that's a good approach, but it has a lot of the concerns that has been already kind of touched upon here on the panel, and I'm sure earlier this morning as well. Reliability, so is it kind of right? Like medicine, one of the reasons why I didn't do medicine, although my parents are not very happy about that, is like, if anything goes wrong, somebody could die in medicine. In law, they just go to jail or they lose money, right? But but in this case, hallucination, it's a problem, right? And we cannot get it wrong either, right? Data privacy, as Sunny has touched upon, and confidentiality risks. When I presented to a room of in-house lawyers, we asked what was the main problem that a lot of people had indicated why they haven't adopted it. They were concerned with confidentiality, client data, and access to that. Copyright infringement, as was hinted upon, and that's a whole conference in itself. Deep fakes, explainability risks. So I work in the finance industry. So if you're with the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, you ask a bank, so you introduce this AI, explain how it works, how it came to the decision. If you can't explain it, that's a problem. Change and expectation management challenges. So how do you change the internal work? I love Dr. Cheung kept talking about workflow, because that's exactly it, right? How do you change? Doctors have a way of doing things, lawyers have a way of doing things. Are they willing to change that, right? And then expectation management. Is this going to be a magic thing where you just plug something in and it comes out with a fantastic answer, or it's not so good and you throw it all away, right? So managing that is important. Investment costs, it does cost money. I just had lunch with some people and they were talking about, so some of, you see at the bottom some logos. If you're in the legal space, you recognize some of them. The incumbent players like, Thomson Reuters and LexisNexis now have got their AI products. You've got pure plays like Harvey. If you don't know, that's after, Suits. If you watch Suits, that's where the name came from. LegalOn, they're pure play legal techs. And then you've got the Gen AIs, whether it's Claude or GPT or the open source ones, which is Llama, those LLMs, which are under the hood, and people build both a UI, UX at the top, but also the dedicated data at the bottom, right? So you could build those in those, and that costs money to actually invest in that. And then it's a switching cost. If you now invest in something, as was mentioned earlier on by Winnie, things change really quickly. So suddenly you invest in something and you have to change, that's a problem. So that's the second approach. So we'll buy, but increasingly, I've seen, interestingly, some companies are deciding to build. And that's because now with cloud solutions, you can actually have dedicated clouds and you can try and switch with different LLMs, right? We were just talking about that, Sunny, right? So you want DeepSeek, you can go to Ali Cloud, will offer that to you as well. You want to switch, you can switch, right? Same with Microsoft, right? You can also change, and then there's also the open source. So increasingly, you have all the above, but it is a higher cost. So some people are actually saying, hey, now with DeepSeek, I can put it in my own server. Then I know for sure all the data is kept, in my building, so that, literally, right? But then I need to. I'm a law firm. I'm used to hiring lawyers. Now I have to hire like developers, data scientists, ML experts, right? And then there's a tech risk because it's moving so quickly. I invest in this and it moves. So as a law firm, am I used to dealing with that, right? But there are some, and one of Hong Kong's largest law firm has decided to build its own. Right, so this is actually happening right now. Here's another matrix to think about depending on your stakeholders. So who here's from a law firm? Okay, good. So a few. So the law firms, right? So what are your concerns? You're concerned about ultimately profitability, right? So part of that is linked to client expectations. What are your clients expecting? If AI is there, are you moving as fast as they would expect you to be, right? How are you pricing it? Hence, if you're charging by the hour, when I started LITE Lab, I approached my law firm friends to say, hey, would you like to work with students on proof of concepts? And my really close friends would say, well, Brian, we charge by the hour. So why do we want to save time? Right? So it impacts the pricing model. But of course, if your firm actually just charges on a per deal basis or a project basis, then hey, saving time is money. Any time I save is profit, right? So the firm structure is impacted. We admit it. So this is how I describe the law firm structures like this. Those of us that went through law school, and then you get to partnership. But if you need less lawyers, less junior lawyers, you have less people coming into the funnel. What does that mean for how you structure your law firm? Jones is one of the largest law firms in the world. How many more lawyers do you really need? All the class sizes and input is less. then you need less law schools, right? That's one of our concerns too. Now, then of course there's the then there's workflow adjustment too. Lawyers are used to doing it a certain way, so that's why again I love how Dr. Cheung mentioned. If you have to change the way you're working, they don't like that, right? We love the way the work we used to, but what are the opportunities, the efficiencies, the business model possibilities, and competitiveness could be there for the taking. Similarly, so who's from in-house here? A few from in-house as well, right? So in-house, your main concern, costs, right? You want to reduce costs, which is why some of our partners in LITE Lab were actually from in-houses, because you need to do more with less, right? So you need to adjust the expectations of your internal clients and also your management of the legal service delivery, right? So how quickly and how accurately are you doing it? We need to do spend, right? So often it's managing outside counsel. So again, I used to be in-house, so that used to be an important aspect. And then it's also the internal lawyers, whether they're willing to change their approaches and like. But then again, the opportunities are efficiency, staff satisfaction is an important one. A lot of in-houses stay in their jobs for a long time, and actually keeping them happy is a good thing. And and efficiencies and cost. Now then, adjudicators, judiciary, arbitrators, mediators. Who's from that sector? Very good. So again, Winnie can speak much more to that and already has. But interestingly, what I'm hearing is, there's evolving client and adjudication expectations. So one story I had heard was that, the arbitrator said, hey, can you please do a comparison of both pleadings and what the differences are, and do it by Monday? Thank you very much. So normally what would happen is, okay, you burn the hours of a junior associate, but now you can use these tools and just compare the two and woof, comes out, right? And if the adjudicator, whether a judge or the arbitrator says, that's what I want, and you're a firm that can do this quickly versus a firm that cannot, that impacts, again, it's the expectations. Access to justice becomes really important, right? So in Singapore, the Singapore Academy of Law actually introduced Harvey for the lower courts. I thought was genius. So in the small claims court, you're unrepresented. So that means you don't have to hire lawyers. So when they tried it there, no lawyers can complain, right? Because it's unrepresented. But so the idea was to allow for lay people to get access to a tool like that because sometimes, and we'll get to that under citizens, you just need just good enough, right? It's not legal advice, but is it good enough for them to understand their rights and the like at a low cost? And then of course, if you use it at the judiciary and adjudication level, you can improve your efficiencies and like as well. So then those of us from law schools, any others other than my colleagues here? So at law schools, we're trying to think about pedagogy and assessment methodology, right? One of the big concerns when Ngai first came about was, again, Hong Kong U famously banned it, but that's because of, you have one student who is very tech savvy and gets VPN. And so for those that don't know, we can't get, not from Hong Kong, we can't get, ChatGPT is actually geo-blocked. We can't get it here. The only way to get it is through VPN. And so the savvy one could do it and the non-savvy one couldn't, and the professor just sees, oh, this one looks really good, right? So we temporarily banned it, but when I immediately wrote back and said, I lead LITE Lab, I need access, it was clarified. If the professor says it's okay, it's okay. But how does that mean for teaching? How do we now teach? How do we assess? There's some that actually want to go back to what I call the parchment and quill. The only way to be safe is just carry a pen and paper and go in and write. But is that really the best way? Because to be honest, when they go into the real world, that's not what they do, right? So there are challenges there. Student employability is an important one, right? So if they're going into the workforce, how are we equipping them appropriately? And then for teacher, how teachers adjust to this is an important one as well. But then again, the opportunities are we get the chance to, better prepare the future legal professionals by using these tools. Now, then you've got ALSPs, which are alternative legal service providers. So those are like the accounting firms and the like. They're adjusting to this and say, hey, we can do this. We can do these offerings, and they can move much faster than firms. The tech vendors, I joke that even if you were in the traditional AI that Dr. Cheung was talking about, everybody's sprinkling their, Gen AI magic sauce on top of it because, for marketing purposes. But do they really know how it works? But again, the benefit is everybody is now using it. And last but not least, and relevant to the topic as well, citizens, right? So how reliable is it? So ultimately, it still needs to be reliable. But we do have this issue from a regulatory point of view, a legal regulatory point of view of unauthorized practice of law. So at what stage is it giving legal advice? right? And the Law Society has very strict rules around what is giving legal advice, right? But then it is important for lay people to understand their rights and obligations. So that's the balancing and regulatory aspect that we need to go into. So in terms of the ongoing journey, the current use cases are very well explained early on by Winnie and Dr. Cheung. Summarizing, great, brainstorming, fantastic. First drafts, especially when it's targeted for a certain persona, fantastic. Translation, awesome, right? Preliminary research, preliminary, right? Great, right? Business of law, so in terms of practice management, marketing, billing, timesheets, client updates, all of these tools are being used. What's promising on the transactional side? Contract review, deal insights, contract drafting. So there are tools and they're being offered right now in relation to this. How good they are, vary, but they all seem to be getting better from a litigation point of view. You can do analysis, compilations, pleading draftings. In-house, you can do intakes, triage, spend management, invoice summary. So these are the hopes and intents that these are the new legal texts that are coming up. But remember, it's still an exploration stage, right? In terms of the capabilities of the Gen AIs you're using, what are the use cases? I think that was highlighted very importantly. Some use cases are better than others. You need to develop the skills to use it. And one of the discussions we had was about prompting, right? Do you know how to prompt it properly? And then the cost benefit analysis. So even after all the things that it can do, is it worth relearning how you do things? How much does it cost? And the like. And then it's particularly challenging, especially because it requires experimentation and product market fit. And as lawyers, we like precedent. We don't like to change a lot, right? So actually changing is that's one of the challenges where the profession is concerned. I want to end with this slide. If you note the subtle difference, I changed, when I first titled this, I called it 2025 January State of Play. Then just in January alone and into February, we had DeepSeek, and then now we have deep research. If you haven't heard of DeepSeek, you will all probably would have heard of, right? With deep research, there's some reports that it can actually do PhD level research, which means for legal research, it could be pretty high because the high level of reasoning, chain of reasoning that it actually is happening. So, and this is just happening in the last 2 months, or 1 month and a bit, right? But I also wanted to end with this cartoon, which is relatively well known, but it's slowly happening in our workplaces, right? So somebody can use Gen AI to create from a single bullet point a long email and pretend that they wrote it. And then on the other side, people don't want to read the whole thing. But so they use Gen AI to summarize the whole thing, right? So who's generating all the work? What's the carbon footprint and all of this? But it's a fast evolving space that we have here in this space, and look forward to continuing on this journey with you all. So the good news here is that the CE in his latest address actually issued an announcement of a new advisory group in relation to promoting law tech. And of course, Gen AI is an important part of it. And sorry, one reason I was not here earlier this morning is because I was attending an inaugural meeting at the Department of Justice. So we are working towards growing legal tech here in Hong Kong, including, of course, AI, and look forward to involving all of you as part of the important ecosystem members. Thank you very much.